Yeah, hi everyone. So we are coming to the crash course of front-end basics. So today what we'll try is we'll see the basics first. We'll see a bit of a coding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which are exactly the basics for any front-end technology you would go ahead with. Whether it is React, Angular, Vue.js, Ember.js, anything, you definitely need to know first JavaScript and HTML and CSS. That's the one. And then later we'll see that how Node.js and React.js became common. We'll see in the next session, the next one. So starting off with the basics first, let's see a bit of a concept. So whenever we say any front-end technology, what does it exactly involve? It is definitely, that's what I said, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, scripting technology. Hypertext markup language. There's a markup language. CSS is cascading style sheets, which is used for styling. So whenever anybody says that "Yeah, I'm styling the web page, so they are working with CSS, or maybe they are working with enhanced libraries of CSS. Maybe that's Bootstrap. So these are other things which makes it easy. JavaScript also has various other libraries with it. jQuery is one very commonly used, popularly used. So these are the main common parts. First thing that anybody should be aware of is the browser concepts, browser components. So if somebody says, "What is a browser component?" the first thing that should come to your mind that is it has a user interface. How exactly the user interface looks like? So think of it of this web page only. Think this is a web page where we have a link section. We can write something and Google search it. There's a timing, there is a display, there is a background image, there's a temperature where you can add the place's name, a certain code from some person, and then if you want to make a to-do list of exactly what the tasks you need to do. So this is a web page that is being shown in your screen. This is actually a wallpaper, not a web page, because you would have a IP address. But let's think of it in this way. Say you are writing some address like www.anupamasingha.com. So that's a web address that you are going to exactly work it out. So whenever you work with anupamasingha.com, that is the relevant IP address. There might be an IP address behind it. So it might not be this. It might be 192, 168, some different numbers. IP before address, right? There will be a port number always associated. Which port you are showing the web page. So whenever you fire or maybe say you press enter in this command, I'm not going to press anything, enter, and then it gets loaded. So exactly what happens in the background? User interface tells you that please type the IP address, whichever is relevant for you. Either type the IP address or type a DNS name like anupamasingha.com, something, www.gmail.com, something like that. So once you type that and then hit a command, and this command can be anything, this command can be entered. Once you enter that, it will render some web page to you, it will render resources to you. And these resources are again what? The same thing. It can be HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It might be an image, a JPEG, PNG image, or it might be a text file. It might be anything, but certain kind of resources. So, what helps us in using this in user interface? So, there is a browser engine. Browser engine is the one which takes in the commands and then shows you the resources. Okay, so that's what we saw. Then there is a rendering engine that is extremely important. Like you would have definitely heard, like V8 is for Chrome. That is a very common rendering engine. So V8 is a very common rendering engine for Chrome. Then Spider, Monkey, or something, their name is there. So exactly what it does, this rendering engine, it takes in the context sensitive grammar or the context free grammar and then creates a render tree, or it creates a CSS, that is a layout tree, and then it gets rendered on web page. Now somebody would ask me that what is the meaning of render? So render is nothing very jazzy terminology, but it's just painting the web page. That's it. If you understand it simply like I am painting this web page, I'm writing some content to it, or I'm writing some painting some images. That's the rendering. So this layout tree is for the CSS. So it tells you that exactly this render tree tells you, like say you have a button or you have a text box. These all things have to be printed, but where exactly? So the position, where exactly it has to be rendered, on which area, on the bottom as a footer, or on the top, or on the side navigation, or on the panel, or what is the size of it, right? So these all things are being rendered. Now context sensitive and context free. So context sensitive is CSS, JavaScript, JS I'm writing a short form. Please understand that later. And HTML is context free. Now, why would somebody say that HTML is context free while this is context sensitive? Say if somebody writes a button here at top and then writes a input box and then creates maybe a form. You can have any sequence. It can come in any sequence. So sequence is not required. It's not that important in HTML. So that is context free. There's no context to it. But if somebody says first says that okay, the ID, if the ID is one, first the ID is one, then if ID is greater than five, say, go home, the good people, or else go for vacation. We actually blessed people now. In COVID times, nobody is able to go around, right? So, say if somebody has not written this in ID, somebody has not written it only, and somebody has wrote it at the end, what will the value of ID have at the beginning? So, it will have some garbage value. Say, even before initializing it, some garbage value, something like this is there. Okay. So that's the garbage value. So that's not garbage, but that's a value that is there saved in the code. So whenever it is greater than five, go to home or else go for vacations. Okay, so that's how it works. Then what are all the important things apart from it? Browser components, rendering engine. We already spoke of it. How does this render tree or CSS layout area looks like? Let's go back. I have already saved as in one image for you. Like, see, this is the document object model. Nothing. Think of it as a render tree only. Like, there is an HTML tag, that is the main tag that is there. Head will see all these things. So it's like this root element has two children. This has two again children. Then this one has two children, and then the CSS object model that tells you that okay, the font size is this, it should be bold, it should be displayed, it should be relative, it should display on the right of something or in an absolute position. So these are the CSS. So combining both the DOM and the CSS object model, you get the render tree at the end, and then render tree along with the CSS, the layout tree, it finally renders it on the web page. Now, next question comes like whenever we see this, okay, there is a networking tab. If you do a control shift I or there's a different command in Mac, maybe you can see. So there are various, when you inspect it, you can see various codes. So if you want to see that exactly what is written here, you can select this and then you will see that, okay, this is a list item li, and then what is the style for it. So the styling also you can see. The console will be printed. The source is what. So you can see that exactly the code sections here. Network is one important part. In network, what happens whenever you are, say, again re-entering this web page? So these many network calls are happening, and then those many responses are coming. So if all only the etc we are seeing, like collect. So it tells that when I'm hitting this address, you can directly hit this address. That is a post command that gets a return response. So this response is the one which gets rendered, or maybe used to say this name Ayla Gregoric. I may be wrong in pronouncing it. Maybe advocate and web performance is better for me. Or guru, even better. So this word guru is being printed here as because it has come as response from some of the API calls, application programming interface. That is the backend. From the backend, the resources has come. It might be anything I said, right? It can be a JavaScript response. It might be an image response, or it may be a JSON object response. Anything would come, and then it is getting printed. So uh, the the next important part is the networking. That is a very important part of the browser components. Networking. So how the resources will be handled and how will the binding happen on the web page. So that's one important area. Then JavaScript interpreter is also there. Uh, it tells us how will you handle the JavaScript. Okay, so exactly how will you interpret whether the version is the recent one or an old version. So these all things will come to you as which one is the important one. And then there is a UI backend. UI backend, that is the one which actually gives you all the responses, right? It sends you the responses in any format, and then you render it on the in the web page. This UI you can write in different things, like you can write the most commonly that we generally use is Java. It might be Python. It might spelling is wrong. Python. It might be C sharp. It might be .NET. It might be Node.js. We'll see Node.js later. In Java course, we already saw it in the other sessions like Spring Boot and all. So that is one important part. And across the web page, say I have multiple web pages. I have designed not just one, but I have designed say uh, multiple web pages. I am clicking on products. It will render me a different web page. If I click on find products, it will give me a different web page. So all these different web pages which are coming, I want some certain say this word develop to be saved there also in the first page and in the second page also. But if I try to bring this data time and again through the API calls, which actually you should know that takes time, right? It takes time. How many milliseconds you can see the throughput time. So it will make the page the load time extremely delayed, and you would always want to have as minimal load time as possible for the entire web page, right? So there is another section to it is in the application you have local storage, you have session storage, and you have cookies. So you can use these things, and then you can use all these different cookies and all, and then decide what the web pages would be. Okay, so you can save data across the pages by using this application local storage, session storage cookies as and when required. So whether you want it in the client side, whether you want it in the server side. So these are important aspects that you need to focus on while you are doing the coding part of it. Okay. So now let's come to a bit of like basics even before the coding. Let's go into the history of it. So the common ones uh, is JavaScript, that is the basics of any coding language. Then Angular became common. Angular, not just Angular, it's Angular JS. That became common around 2010 perhaps. Then in 2016 around, Angular 2 was launched, which was completely different. Like it was the TypeScript version. Okay, so that became extremely common, uh, and it was not backward compatible with the Angular JS. And after that, it came the React JS became extremely common. It was around the year of 2012, but in 2018 around, I think, yes, 2018 around only, React started booming in the industry. So now, if you popularity increased. So these are all storytellings that I'm currently doing. So if you don't know the story background of story of it, then coding doesn't become interesting to you. So you need to know what you're exactly studying about. So this was the time. So that is why we'll exactly, and even Angular became something not very commonly used. It is a complete framework. React.js is just a library, so it is very easy. So we'll see that in the next session. For now, let's just focus on the basics of HTML, CSS. The other important part is like the DOM versus virtual DOM. So, what is a DOM? What is a virtual DOM? We'll see virtual DOM later, not now. We'll just see what the DOM is. So, DOM is document object model. That's what we saw, right? The tree structure that we saw. It consists of that, meaning all the layout tree when it's combined with the render tree and it gets rendered on the web page. That is the DOM part of it. So now enough of theory that we have gone through. Now let's start coding. Okay, so I have just created a simple folder which is front-end demo YouTube, which has nothing, just a simple folder. And I have installed a live server here. This one you can actually I can uninstall and install again. So whenever we will try to publish this, even without live server, the code will work. So you need to go to the web page and then you can save the page as .html and then double click so the web page will open. Instead of that, what we will try to do, we will just expose it through the IP address and the port. So that's why we have used this. So if let's start. So what it exactly does is it first searches that where is that index.html. So if I click on that code, it will show that okay. I'll click it or go like it's starting the server at port so and so. Let's go back and see. Okay. So you can see that index.html has been opened in the port with port 5500 and 127.0.0.1, that is the IP address, which is actually localhost. So if you either write this or if you write as localhost, both will be the same, one and the same thing. Even if you remove this index.html and just directly launch this, that also is exactly the same, right? So 127.0.0.1 is nothing but a local host that we are exactly rendering. So now let's see exactly how we can do the coding. So before starting, let me close all these things. I know it has already started at the port. Now we are going to write HTML, right? So doc type HTML. So it will tell that okay, I'm going to write HTML5, which is the latest version of it. And we always write it in tags, right? HTML is the main tag of HTML, which can have a head, and this head can have a title. So if you go back to the screen, you can see uh, the heading has localhost 5500. This part has the name as localhost 5500. So this is the title. We want to replace that title with some name to it, right? So let's give some name to it. My page is the name that I'm trying to give. Okay, and let's have a body section, and in the body we can write anything. A body in that we can have a tag. I'll make things very fast because I think that these are easy things and you can always go back and learn and come back. And hello world always rules. So let's have that hello world only in place. And let's see. So whenever I try to refresh the page, you can see hello world here, right? So hooray! That's our first JavaScript, even without lots of coding and anything, we have already developed our code, right? Okay. So now coming back to the code, we will try to maximize it, right? So let's come back and see that instead of h1, in fact, we can have multiple different elements also. You can have h2, h3, all different components, tags with it. A very common part of it is like you can have, you can put in CSS inside of it also. Like say if you want to have a styling, like the inline one, inline styling. Let's first see what are the different kinds of styling that any CSS will have. The first one is the internal. That is I would say not the internal, but the inline styling. That's good in a way, not very good in fact, but it's an okayish type of styling that you can actually do. So how do you exactly do it? Like you will put in a style only for this H1 tag, that is not even for H1 tag, but only for this specific H1 tag, where you are putting a style, and in double quotes you will write say color. You want to give a color of different type, like say blue violet color, and whatever you write will be printed. So let's have another H1 here, and let's write how are you. But this tag will not, this styling will not apply here. It is only for inline, only for this H1 tag specifically, not even for the this line. Okay. So let's go back and see our code. How is it getting printed? So see perfectly. Hello world is the first one. How are you? The second one. That is not getting applied. Okay. Then the second option to it, the second kind of styling that is a better one, in fact, better than even this one is like it is called as internal styling. Internal, how do you read it? So something like you would want to put in the scripts in the class itself. So let's see how we can code this part. So say in the head section, we will have one more style to it, and we can have this h1 directly told as h1, and we'll put curly braces. Whatever we have put it here in the style part, we'll put this part, color is violet. I'll cut it, and I'll even remove this styling, and I'll put it here. So you're telling that universally whenever there is an h1, it will apply to both now. So this is something like inline styling, sorry, internal styling, and internal to this HTML web page only. If you have some written other HTML pages like abc.html, it will not apply there, but it will apply only to this file. So this is known as internal styling. And now if we go back to our page again, you can see that okay, both are now in the color what? Blue violet color. Okay. So that is internal styling. Then there is another third kind of styling, that is the CSS part is the external styling. How do you write it? External. So it should be universal, okay, across any files wherever you want to use the styling, right? So this is the I would say that this is the best way of styling. This can, you can say it as better than inline. But this is something, the third one. The third one that we are exactly seeing is the best kind of styling. So let's go back to our page and let's create a screen like script dot styling. So CSS. So let's have one internal styling. where we are seeing, say, we already did for h1, now let's do for h2. Here let's have some color as different one, brown maybe, and let's have some background color as which color, brown would look good at which color. Let's have some violet color. Okay. And this we have to include it in our page, right? So how exactly we are going to include that? How do you think we can do it? So you, in the style, this is internal, let's keep it here. And then one more section I will write, that is link the relevant style sheet type, and the reference to it is script.css, right? And we don't have anything outside of it, just one tag, one link tag, so we are closing it with the forward curly braces. Okay, so this is the third kind of styling, and let's write something here. In we write it as h2. So let's okay, done for the day. Okay, and let's go back and see our web page now. Okay, done for the day. Please relax now. Okay, so the brown color is on the different color. I don't know what exactly it is, but something like that. So it is getting applied. So currently, what we saw three different types of styling to it: line, internal, and external styling, right? So this is how we do the styling part. Now, if you come back and want to see a few more other different types of coding, we can definitely do. Let's think of it as which one shall we see? So it's a good practice always to define everything inside a div, and it's even a better practice if you define it with the format with an ID. If you are putting ID, that is even a better way of doing things. So on unordered list, and then inside that you can have a listed item. You can say that okay, I'm going to study HTML, I'm going to study today CSS, and what else, JavaScript. So that's one diff part of it. See, so you can see, okay, so there are three bullet points to it: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you have listed the items, and then that is getting printed. Now, say you want this one also to have a different style. For this, you had a different style, but we have a different style for this also. But you want only for this JavaScript one. You don't want it for the other ones. That also can be done. That can be done in a way like, say, this JavaScript we can have define it inside our div, and let's take this inside of the listed item where we are putting the class. Okay, let's not put it as ID but class. We can do anything. And link is a tag resource reserved keyword, so we will use a different reserved word as links. And then we'll go back to this page. Let's save it. Let's go back to the script.css. Since it is a class, we have to use hash. Okay, always remember. Sorry, not hash, but dot links. Links will have a color. Let's have some different color only, which we have not used. A dark green color. So let's go back to our front end. You can see that JavaScript is getting printed in this color. Okay. Now let's go back to this one and say we have this list, right? And we have the lists here. This lists, I want to print it in some other color, but this has an ID but not a class. So this div is referenced by an ID, but this div has been referenced by a class. So there is a slight difference to it actually. Which one should you go ahead with? Meaning, how should you exactly write it? So when you write it as a class ID, you will have to define it using Was it not lists? Color, some different colors with a dark red. And let's go back and see our web page. So HTML and CSS now has a beautiful background of red color, dark red color. That's how we define it. So that is how we have a segregation to it. Okay. So we have a segregation like if it is an ID, then you will do a hash. If it is a class, you will write it as a prefix as a dot. Now what next? We can even have a what next we can do. So we have done this, we have done this one. Now let's have some form. Say if you want to have a form. Form is a very common one, right? Meaning you want to submit a page, certain elements to it. So form action would be what? You say index.html is the action. In the index.html, the action has to be done. What exactly the method would be? Whether a get or a post, that can be done, right? And inside it, let's have one input box. Input type equal to text name. You can put it as name, and then we can put in those placeholder as what is name. You can write it as that only, and we have to put a forward slash because we have no other sub elements to it. It's only one liner tag and its details. And let's have a button. Okay, so this button type will be what? It will be for submission of this form. And then this button will have a button with a text written on it that so that is submit. So whenever somebody clicks on the submit button, it will take the value and it will post it onto the index.html using get. So you will be able to see even the value part of it. Okay. So that's how it exactly works. Let's go back to our page. Uh, Save it. Okay. So now you can see that there's a name, and then say whenever you write like then you click on submit. What do you exactly see? See, the index.html with the name Anupama has been submitted in the form, right? So that's what happens. So you can always refresh it also. So whenever you refresh it, nothing comes but name is coming. So this name has come from the value, right? Uh, if you go back to the screen and go back to the value part of it, you will be able to see that this name is coming from the placeholder value. Okay. Now, if somebody says that, okay, I also want to have a table. Table is also one common important tag. A table with table rows elements, and in each table row, I want to have table data. Table data like you can say task one, write the code, and then a simple ones I'm putting, and then you can have a next table row where you can say right task submit in particular. So you are doing some coding. You want the table to be printed. So let's go back and see how it exactly looks. See, now what has happened? It is getting printed, but you're not able to even see the border of it. Like it's not looking as a table format, right? And the main reason for it is like you haven't put uh, the borders to it, right? The table needs to have say, okay, it needs to be say 1 pixel solid. Certain patterns are there. If you put in think it's red color. So you have different attributes. You can always go back and study and come back maybe how exactly. So red color is not like that. Okay. What if I just remove it? Okay. So I have tried to remove that ridge and solid. I have just put in one liner border equal to 1 pixel. So when I do that, what happens at the back end? It puts a beautiful border to it of 1 pixel length. So that's how you write it. Now, say somebody wants that I want to write some JavaScript coding. So when JavaScript coding you would want to write, uh, and say somebody says that okay, I want to even before JavaScript, let's do one more thing, one small piece of it, which when I remembered, let's do that also. So let's have one div uh, with a class with name as say container, and that container will have nothing. Let's just write container one for now. And similarly, let's do the same thing again. So this is another div class, which is a type of container, and you have container 2 written to it. So when you write a div class container 1, container 2, and you go back to the screen and see, you will just see that okay, container 1, container 2 has been written. But if you want to give some styling to it, right? Some styling can be done. Uh, like what exactly you can do. So let's go back to our script.css. Let's put some styling, like we put it as class, right? So we have to put a dot, not hash because that's not an ID, but a dot because that's a class, and container. And in container, put anything like the height part of it as 7 pixel maybe, and then the width as say 70 pixel. Sorry for the noise in the background. Then there's a background color. Background color you can put as maybe aquamarine, and then put some border to it. The border is exactly how you write, like 10 pixel. Okay, red, and yeah. See, now you got that is for the border. The for the border tag there's this symbol. Okay, perfect. Then let us put some more things to it like margin. Try to go back and see in how exactly this is written. There's a margin to it, and then the padding. So padding also, say 10 pixel you're putting padding. Okay. So when you write this and save it, let's go back to our front end and see what is happening. So it has beautifully put in a very rich red color border of 10 pixel and a container which has a 70 into 70 pixel height and width with a background color of aquamarine and then the border. Okay, so that's how beautifully this is getting printed. So since you have put it both as a class as containers, so the same styling got repeated in both of them. You can always go back and say that okay, this container 2 can have a different class of say container hyphen 1, the styling part of it. Like you can go back to your code and say that okay, not container but repeat it again with a different name. Say container 1, and instead of red you would say some other color. Okay. Some other color like purple. That's purple. That's get selected only. And this container 1, I am going to tell in index.html. Type is this. So whenever you will go back now and see the border, it is different, right? Because for the border, now we have put it as what did we put it as? Purple in the container 1. So That's how the CSS exactly works. Now, say somebody wants to use JavaScript. So that's all we saw for CSS. That's enough for now, meaning you can always go back and see multiple tags. There are almost 30 to 40 very commonly used tags. If you know that, uh, you need to practice it more often, then you will be able to understand things like what is padding, what is margin, what is left, right, that is left, the height, whenever the boxes, in fact, whenever the boxes are getting printed, right? If you, when you see this, when you put the top right, it is always cyclic. In that way, it is getting printed. So you go back and see how the CSS can be done. We have seen enough of it as a crash course maybe. Let's now see JavaScript. How exactly we can use the JavaScript part of it. So if we put in a console, like we want to put in here, JavaScript is the main part actually, friends. Meaning you should always understand JavaScript and learn JavaScript in a way that this is, if this is front end and an ocean, JavaScript is the boat that will help you sail through it. Okay? Without the JavaScript, you will not be able to code it well. So, and it is the main part of the backbone of front end technology. So you need to be very good and adept with it, meaning the JavaScript part of it. So say if somebody says that okay, I want to use inline JavaScript, okay. So then how do they do it? In the script tab, in the script, you can put now. Okay. So in this script, you can write whatever JavaScript you exactly want to print. Like console.log is something that you write in JavaScript, right? Console.log hello world. So whenever you're printing this is inline, meaning within the HTML file you are writing the JavaScript, similar to how we wrote it for CSS. Now let's go to the front end and see where it got printed. Nowhere, right? We are not able to see it. So that is where you will have to go back to the inspect and then see it in the console. Console, you are logging hello world. See, so if somebody writes it here, like console.log, you can always practice whatever you want to write. Somebody writes Anupama Sinha and then enters. So see, Anupama Sinha got printed. But that is an undefined. Why exactly? What kind of, you have not initialized it, or what are the object types in JavaScript? That is another story to it. So this is how you can see all the JavaScript, whatever you're writing in the console, you'll be able to see it in the console uh, for the JavaScript. Now think that somebody does not want to write it in the as inline part of it, but they want to write it as somewhere outside. So you will have to. That is one way of doing it. And how do you comment it? So if somebody wants to comment it, inline JavaScript. I'll put this code in the external JavaScript. How will you write? So you can have a script and you can say even before writing the script, let's have a certain script in the at at place. So script dot JavaScript. You always save it with HJS. The name can be anything, whatever you want to name, but you can write. So let's write external JavaScript. So it can be used across the coding, right? Wherever you want to print it, it will get printed. So we are trying to have it script src equal to in the same folder structure. That is why dot and right slash, that is in the same wherever you are standing, stand there itself, and then you can see the script.js. If you want to go back, then you will have to write what dot right slash, something like that, meaning going back cd dot. That is what refers. Go back one folder structure, it's back, and then come back. That's how you write. So this is external JavaScript. Now let's go back to our front end and then see. Are we able to see something here? Right? So external JavaScript got printed from the external file. We didn't write it here internally. We wrote it externally and that got printed. So let's go back to our coding part. Let's do some coding here. You can write either var or the recent common ones are let. Let message be hi Anupama. And then in that console you want to print the same message. So once you see that, definitely it will get printed. Let's go quickly and check. Let's see hi Anupama. You can see it definitely here. Hi Anupama got printed very quickly. Now let's cover this topic first. Okay. Now say somebody can say that let number be there. So let number be there. Let number two be there. And let's print that in the console. Okay. Number. Let's go back to the screen. What just happened? So do what printed. Right. Now somebody says that okay, I don't want I don't want two to be printed, but rather I want that to be constant. So I'll name that as not as let, but there's another type of defining it. Let number equal to this. Then whatever somebody says that make it 8 or make it 7, whatever anybody else says, but still the number will always be 2. So you can't change it. You are making it immutable. Like if you go back now and you can see that some error has come. Assignment to constant variable. Script.js line number 7. Okay. So script.js line number 7, what does it say? That two value. That is one way of seeing thing. The other way is like you can go to the source, you can go to the script.js, you can see exactly that there's an error, and then you can see that error, the error message is here. That is also one way of debugging the application. So you can see that it has some error. In the source, you will see all the everything loaded, all the resources being loaded, and in the console you can come back and see the error. So there are two ways of debugging. One is like in the browser itself using the uh, inspect, and the other one is like number 8. So uh, exactly how did we do? The first one is like in the browser itself, you are seeing unquote type error assignment to constant variable script.js. You can go back to the source. You can see all the resources being loaded. Script.css, you will see that there are no issues to it. Script.js, if you go, you can see a red line error. Now, what is it exactly telling? You can hover over it and then see unquote type error assignment to constant variable. That's exactly what you are seeing it here, right? So this is one way that you are trying to debug the application from the front end, that is the browser end. And then there is another way uh, that you can see that line number 7 has errored out. So let's make it let number be a defined one. That's one way of doing it. The other is like you can have string, you can have numbers, you can have a different object format also. So let's say let book which is a type of an object, okay, and that will have keys, okay, id key as one more name of the book, what name of the book, like the power of now. So that is one very wonderful book by Eckhart Tolle. If you don't know of it, then please go back and read this book. Study terminology would also be right for this book. This is so great. But and now let's go back and see what is being shown. Okay, so we have not printed it in fact. So let's print it after this book console.log. So you can see, okay, the ID is one, the name is this, and prototype is object. So type of is object. So that's how you write, even can declare variable types as objects. Now say somebody says that I want to rename the books. I saw that the power of now got printed, right? But I don't want to print the power of now, but I want to print some other name of the book. Okay, so you can print that also. You can write it in this way: book dot what exactly you can write as book dot name, a different name. Let's write another name. Even you can give a single quote like I'm giving it now. The power of now is one important book. Stillness speaks. That is also by Eckhart Tolle. This is also very powerful. So when you print that and then you go back to the front end, you can see stillness speaks. So you can do it in this way also. The one different way of doing it is that you can even write it in this way. The ID, the key, and key is one. I want to make it two. So let's go back here. Here, see, the two got printed now, right? You can see the value many how many times it is getting rendered. So this is also one way of doing it. The other way, like you can even write it in this way, like let name. Instead of that name, you can put in different variable. Let variable name be name, and then you can write book var name, and then var name. The value of var name will be name. Perfect. So I'm sorry, this is a string, not so. The value of var name is name, and there you are trying to put in a different name. Inference and that is another classical book by Dale Carnegie. So something that I'm just giving you good names of the books. You can go back and read if you want, or you can just ignore it. How to win friends and influence people. So that is how that is one way of doing things. So we saw a few patterns like you have defined an object. You can rename or initialize, meaning you can give a different value by writing book.name, either book.name, or you can write it in as an array but book, and then the key as id will get replaced, or you can have a variable name. In that way you can definitely define it, right? That is one way of doing it. So this is how exactly you do. Now say somebody wants that, okay, I want to have some function, I want to use some function, like function, the name of it as sum. Then somebody says that, okay, where a equal to 1, where b equal to 2. Let is something that you can use recently, that is common. That's okay. We can use anything. Console.log a plus b, but before that let me write it as sum. Okay. As this, then not plus. I always forget it with Java, and then I write it, but that is comma for printing it. But this will not be invoked. You need to invoke it also, right? Somewhere. So sum is getting invoked. Then let's go back to our screen and see. You can see sum is 3. Okay. So this is how JavaScript coding is majorly done. Let's see one more way of doing thing. Like let's open the terminal. You can use Control Shift and tilde sign, or you can write it in this way also. Get it? Well, the other way of running JavaScript is another format. Uh, we saw that we are running JavaScript here in the browser as of now. So when we are writing anything in the Chrome, It's similar to this writing here. So see, if somebody says that, okay, let a equal to Anupama string, and then I say that console.log a, that is not getting defined. That's okay. Meaning, you can write JavaScript here. The browser engine, the JavaScript engine, in fact, renders it and then prints it. The other way of running any JavaScript code is something else. So let's see another way of coding it. Coding it. So whenever you are rendering JavaScript, you are rendering you are using the rendering engine, and that rendering JavaScript engine is like V8 for the Chrome that we used. But somebody around I think 2012 or in which year exactly I don't remember. But somebody said that I don't want my JavaScript to be just executed in the browser engine, but I also wanted to get executed in the outside of the browser engine. So what they exactly did was they took out this uh, engine and they placed it, wrapped it in C++, and then that we called it as Node.js. So Node.js is nothing but a runtime platform where you can run your JavaScript. So either you can run it in the browser or you can run it in Node.js, which is external to the browser. Meaning outside the browser also, you can do it. So that has become extremely common nowadays. Like people use it as a backend technology, Node.js. That's very common and very effective one also. Okay. So the other one, how exactly we do it? So we just write node and then the JavaScript code. Script, no, not script.js. And will it get printed? That's what I'm thinking about it. Yeah. So whatever output, the first is like external JavaScript, then there is a hi Anupama that we are printing, right? This message. Then this number two is getting printed. Then we are console.log, we are doing it here for the book. And then we are printing the sum. So everything got executed. So you can run JavaScript directly also in the browser. Instead of the browser, you can run it directly in the Node.js runtime environment, which is external to the browser, not inside. So actually, how is this? I have installed Node.js from the front end. Meaning you can install Node.js. I'll provide all the links to my YouTube course only. I'll give you all the links to it. So that's how you can and then I'll give you a link to the my notes also, so that will help you in printing it. One last thing like we can do, uh, like if you want to have certain images also you can print. So I had one image that I had already copied it. So let's just copy it here. I have used, and then let's write it at the bottom. If anybody wants to have any image, how will you write it? It's as simple as that. This is one HTML format. That's what I'm trying to show you. That okay. Let's go back to our page. Now you can see images. Let's close this for now. We don't need. So our web page is continuously increasing. That's what we can say. Instead of putting this image here, we can put the image here on the right. That's a homework for you. Like it's not clearly visible. So that's a Labrador Retriever. You can put the image here in this format with the CSS styling. So you can have a div ID or a class ID to it, and then you can always define it, okay, with this class, and then you can define the styling similar to whatever we have done here. You can put in some styling that okay, on the right side, on the relative position, you can define the styling to it. So That's how we do the JavaScript coding part. Okay. So this is all for now. If you want to uh, go ahead with, say, I can give you a few. I have put in a notes format for you guys. So basically, you can see multiple backend technology being written here. You can see the notes here. The Java, Spring Web Services, ORM, the logging part, Git, and then if you scroll below, you will see React. So here in the React, whatever I'm teaching, I'll give a link to this React. I'll give some JavaScript tutorial and React HTML CSS also here. You can go through the projects as well, meaning the projects that I've been currently doing. So whatever I shared in this course, we'll see the React part after this. Okay. So that's all for now. Thank you, guys. Thank you for all the patience. We'll come back with a later module later, and then there we will see how to do the React coding. That's all for now. Thanks, guys. Stay tuned.